The day I met her, I was already late to meet her. I just didn't know that yet. At 6:20 on a Friday evening, I was standing on the shoulder of Route 17 with my sleeves rolled up, grease on my hands, and a woman in a cream blouse watching me like she was trying to decide whether I was a blessing or one more disaster in a week that had already taken too much from her. My name is Ryan Keller. I'm 34, and I run a small auto repair shop in Wilmington, North Carolina. Not a flashy place. 2 bays, 1 office, 1 coffee machine that sounds like it's clearing its throat, and a sign my brother made for me that still hangs crooked no matter how many times I fix it. Cars make sense to me. People, not always. Especially dating. My sister, Megan, had decided my single life was becoming concerningly peaceful, which is how I ended up agreeing to a blind date with a woman named Claire. I knew almost nothing about her. Megan told me she was kind, smart, recently moved back to town, and not the type who will waste your time. That was my sister's way of saying she had already emotionally planned the wedding and wanted me to behave. The date was at 7, a small Italian place downtown. I was dressed better than usual, which for me meant clean jeans, a dark button-down, and boots that had only seen light shop dust instead of heavy shop dust. I had even left early. That was the tragic part. I was trying. Then I saw the hazard lights. A silver sedan sat half on the shoulder, half too close to the lane. Hood up, steam fading into the warm evening air. Cars kept passing without slowing. Beside it stood a woman with one hand on her hip, and the other holding her phone up toward the sky like she was trying to negotiate with a satellite. I slowed before I had time to talk myself out of it. That's the problem with being a mechanic. You can't see a stranded car and pretend you don't know what a dead alternator smells like. I pulled over behind her and got out. She turned fast. Cautious, not helpless. I respected that immediately. "You okay?" I asked. She looked from me to my truck, then back to my face. "That depends. Are you about to tell me this is a very expensive problem? I usually charge extra for bad news, but since we're on the side of the road, I'll discount the emotional damage." That got the smallest laugh out of her. Good sign. "I'm supposed to be somewhere in 40 minutes, she said. "Same. Then we're both doing great." She said it dryly, but there was stress under it. Real stress. Her hair had come loose from whatever neat style it had started in, and her blouse sleeve was smudged where she'd clearly tried to inspect the engine herself. "What happened?" I asked. "It started making a terrible sound, then the dashboard lit up like Christmas, then it gave up in a very dramatic fashion. Cars do love theater. I noticed." I stepped closer to the open hood. "Mind if I look?" She hesitated for half a second, then nodded. "Please." The issue wasn't as bad as it looked. Loose belt, overheated engine, one cracked hose that had chosen the worst possible moment to become emotionally unavailable. I had enough tools in my truck for a temporary fix. Not perfect, but enough to get her off the road and somewhere safe. She stood a few feet away while I worked, watching carefully. Not hovering, observing. "What do you do?" she asked after a minute. "Auto repair?" She smiled faintly. "Lucky me." "That depends how well this holds. And when you're not rescuing strangers from roadside humiliation, I disappoint my sister by not dating enough." That made her laugh for real. A bright surprise sound that made me look up from the engine before I could stop myself. She noticed. Of course she noticed. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. Just proud of the joke." It was decent. High praise from someone whose radiator just staged a protest. She leaned against the passenger door and folded her arms. For the record, I was also on my way to a date. I looked back at the engine. Blind date? There was a beat. "How did you know?" "Your expression." "My expression says blind date?" "It says, I have been convinced by someone who loves me that this is a good idea, and I am not fully persuaded." She stared at me. Then she laughed again. "That is offensively accurate. Sibling?" "Best friend," she said. "She says I've been hiding behind work." "Have you?" Her smile softened, but it didn't disappear. "Maybe." I nodded like that answer made sense. Because it did. I'd been hiding behind work for years. It's easy to call yourself busy when what you really mean is tired of starting over with people who don't know where the bruises are. I tightened the temporary clamp, checked the hose, then stepped back. Try starting it. She slid into the driver's seat. The engine turned once, twice, then caught. She looked at me through the windshield like I had performed a small miracle instead of a roadside patch job. I gave her a thumbs up. She got out, relief all over her face. You just saved my night. Maybe. Drive slow. No heroics. And don't push it past downtown. She looked at my hands. You're covered in grease. I've had worse dates. Her eyebrows lifted. I realized what I'd said 1 second too late. She smiled. I hope this one goes better. Me too. For a second, we just stood there beside her car while traffic moved past and the evening light turned everything warmer than it had any right to be. Then, her phone buzzed. Mine buzzed almost at the same time. We both looked down. My sister Megan, don't be late. Claire is already nervous. Be normal. The woman in front of me looked at her own screen and went very still. Then she slowly looked up at me. Ryan? She asked. My stomach dropped. I stared at her. Claire? I said. For 1 full second, neither of us moved. Then she looked at my grease-covered hands, my open tool bag, her temporarily fixed car, and started laughing so hard she had to lean against the door. And I stood there realizing I had just fixed my blind date's car on the way to meeting her. Claire laughed for a solid 10 seconds. Not polite laughter, not nervous laughter. The kind that starts because the universe has become too ridiculous to respect. I stood there with grease on my hands, a wrench near my boot, and the slow, horrible realization that the woman my sister had been describing for 2 weeks was the same woman whose cracked coolant hose I had just temporarily bullied back into cooperation on the side of Route 17. Well, Claire said finally, wiping one corner of her eye, this is either the worst blind date entrance ever or the best one. I'm leaning toward memorable. That's safe. My sister told me to be normal. Claire looked at my hands. How's that going? Poorly. That set her off again. And honestly, thank God. Because laughter was easier than the sudden awareness that I had already liked her before I knew I was supposed to. That was the problem. On a blind date, you expect awkward introductions, small talk, careful smiles, maybe a polite drink and a mutual decision that nobody did anything wrong, but chemistry had apparently been busy elsewhere. You do not expect to meet the woman on the side of the road, fix her car, make her laugh twice, and then discover the whole evening had been trying to introduce you anyway. Claire looked at my truck. So what now? I glanced at the time. 6:41. We can still make dinner. She looked at her sedan, then at me. My car may or may not survive that plan. It'll survive the restaurant if you take it easy. And you? I'll follow you. She tilted her head. That sounds very mechanic. It is. It also sounds very date. That hit me harder than it should have. She seemed to realize it too, because her smile softened. Sorry, she said. That came out more something than I meant. I'm not complaining. No? No? There was another quiet second between us, and this time neither of us laughed immediately. The road noise filled the space for us. Cars passing, warm wind, the ticking sound of her engine cooling under the raised hood. Then my phone buzzed again. Megan, are you alive? I showed Claire. Claire showed me hers. Vanessa, did he get there? Don't panic. He's probably nice. I stared at the text. Vanessa set you up? Claire nodded. My best friend. My sister works with Vanessa. Of course she does. Small town conspiracy. Apparently with automotive complications. I sent Megan one message. I found her. Long story. We're coming. Then I closed the hood of Claire's car and said, Okay, keep it under 40 if you can. If the temperature gauge climbs, pull over immediately. Yes, sir. I looked at her. She smiled like she knew exactly what that did, and regretted nothing. Dangerous woman. The drive downtown was slow, ridiculous, and strangely intimate for two people in separate cars. I stayed behind her the whole way, watching her brake lights, checking for steam. knowing this was the least romantic escort in the history of first dates and somehow more romantic than any restaurant entrance I could have planned. When we pulled into the lot behind the Italian place, Claire got out first. Her car had held, barely. She pointed at it. Please tell me I'm allowed to be proud. You may be proud of following basic instructions. Romance is alive. I'm warming up. She laughed, then looked me over. That was when I remembered I was still not exactly date ready. My shirt had a grease mark near the cuff. My hands were worse. There was probably a streak near my jaw because life enjoys details. Claire noticed all of it. You look like you fought my car and won, she said. That is accurate. Do you want to reschedule? I expected relief at the option. Instead, the thought disappointed me. So I said, only if you do. She shook her head almost immediately. No. That one word landed clean. Good, I said. Her smile turned smaller, warmer. Good. Inside, the restaurant was exactly the kind of place my sister would pick for me. Soft lights, red brick walls, candles in little glass cups, enough noise to avoid awkward silence but not enough to hide from conversation. The hostess looked between us and said, Reservation? Keller, I said. She checked the tablet. 2? Claire lifted a hand. If the car allows it. The hostess blinked. I said, long story. Claire leaned slightly toward her and whispered, He fixed my car on the way here. The hostess looked at me, then back at Claire, then smiled like she had just decided this was better than whatever drama she usually heard at the host stand. Right this way. The first 15 minutes were easy. Too easy. We ordered water first, because apparently roadside stress is dehydrating. Claire told me she had moved back to Wilmington 6 months earlier after leaving a project management job in Raleigh that had swallowed her life whole. I told her about the shop, my brother, my sister's lifelong belief that she could improve everyone by force. Claire smiled into her glass. Vanessa says I hide behind competence. That sounds related. She says I make lists so I don't have to feel things. Do you? She looked at me over the candlelight. Sometimes, I nodded. I fix cars. That's not an answer. It is if you understand mechanics. Her smile came slowly. Then she asked, So, what are you hiding from? That was not first date small talk. But then again, this date had started with a cracked hose, and both of us stranded inside someone else's plan. I looked down at my hands, cleaner now but still faintly stained around the nails. Starting over badly, I said. Claire's face softened. I didn't mean to say more, but somehow I did. I was engaged once, 3 years ago. It ended quietly, which sounds easier than it is. No big betrayal, no screaming, just one day realizing she had been picturing a life that looked nothing like mine, and I had been trying to become someone who fit it. Claire didn't interrupt. That made it easier and harder. So, after that, I said, I stayed busy. Work is useful. People bring me problems I can actually solve. She glanced toward the window, where her car was probably resting under divine supervision. And then tonight, she said softly, I brought you one. I smiled. Yours was refreshingly literal. That made her laugh, but her eyes stayed gentle. Then she leaned forward slightly and said, For what it's worth, I'm glad it was you who pulled over. That should have been a simple thank you. It wasn't. Not with the way she said it. Not with the candlelight catching her face and the strange feeling that the blind date had ended before it began, and something more honest had taken its place on the shoulder of a highway. Before I could answer, the waiter arrived with bread. Claire looked at the basket, then at me and said, Important question. Go ahead. If this goes badly, do we blame the setup, the car, or the bread? I picked up a piece. The bread deserves a chance to defend itself. She smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I stopped thinking about starting over badly. I started wondering what it would feel like to start over right. The bread defended itself well. So did the evening. By the time our food arrived, the date had stopped feeling blind. Maybe because we had already passed the usual first date performance stage somewhere on Route 17. It is hard to pretend you are smoother than you are when a woman has watched you wipe coolant off your forearm with a fast food napkin. Claire, to her credit, seemed to like me better for it. She was funny in a quieter way than I expected. Not loud. Not performative. More like she had spent a long time observing people carefully and had developed very specific theories as a survival skill. She believed people revealed themselves when plans changed. Anyone can be charming when the reservation is perfect, she said, twirling pasta around her fork. But if the car breaks down, the order comes out wrong, or the flight gets delayed, that's when you meet the real person. I smiled. And who did you meet on the shoulder of the road? She pretended to think about it. A man who carries tools in his truck, makes dry jokes under pressure, and gives instructions like a very polite hostage negotiator. That sounds flattering. It is. Mostly. Mostly? You did say no heroics like I was about to enter a car chase. You looked determined. I was wearing a cream blouse in emotional distress. Dangerous combination. She laughed, and the sound felt easier now. Familiar too fast. That was what I kept noticing. The speed of comfort. The strange absence of effort. I told her about my shop. The old regular who brought donuts every Friday and then complained if we ate too many. My brother, who worked the front desk twice a week and treated every customer like a cousin he had personally been assigned. The 1968 Mustang I had been restoring for a retired teacher who visited once a month just to sit in the driver's seat and tell me about her late husband. Claire listened, like the details mattered. Not waiting for her turn. Not performing interest. Listening. Then she told me why she had moved back. Not all at once. Piece by piece. Raleigh had been good on paper. Senior role. Better salary. Nice apartment. Calendar full enough to make loneliness look productive. Then, her father had a health scare. Minor in the end, thank God, but enough to remind her that life does not politely wait for you to finish being impressive. She came home for what was supposed to be 2 weeks. Then she looked around at her parents, her old town, her own exhausted reflection in the bathroom mirror, and realized she was tired of building a life that looked good from far away and felt empty up close. So I quit, she said. Just like that? She smiled. No. I made a spreadsheet first. Then I quit. That seems on brand. You've known me for 90 minutes. I'm learning fast. She looked at me for a second longer than necessary. Then her expression softened. I'm trying to. That sentence landed somewhere quieter. Not flirtation exactly. Something better. Toward the end of dinner, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Megan, do not mess this up. Vanessa says Claire is laughing. I stared at it. Claire watched my face. Your sister? Unfortunately, she held out her hand. Show me. No. That means yes. I turned the phone so she could read it. Claire laughed so hard the couple at the next table looked over. Then, her phone buzzed. She opened it, sighed, and showed me. Vanessa, he fixed your car? Claire. That's basically a Hallmark movie, with better labor skills. I leaned back. Better labor skills is going on my tombstone. Claire wiped at the corner of her eye. I'm sorry. I hate that she's right. I'm choosing not to examine that too closely. Wise. We paid separately because it was a first date, and neither of us wanted the other trapped in some weird etiquette performance. Outside, the night had cooled. Downtown lights reflected on the pavement, and her silver sedan sat in the lot under a street lamp like a questionable witness. I walked her to it. Moment of truth, she said. The engine started. No warning light. No steam. She looked genuinely proud. See? I followed instructions. For now. You're very suspicious. I know cars. And people? Less. Her smile gentled. Same. Claire leaned against her car, arms folded lightly, looking at me with that calm, careful expression again. Can I ask you something without making this weird? Given how we met, I think weird has been normalized. She nodded once, accepting that. If you hadn't found out I was your date, would you have asked for my number? I looked at her. The honest answer came faster than I expected. Yes. Her face changed. Just a little. Even covered in grease? Especially then. You laughed at my Home Depot discount emotional damage line. That was a strong opening. You also called cars theatrical. They are. I respect that in a woman. She smiled, but her eyes stayed on mine. And you? I asked. If you hadn't been my date? Yes. She took a breath, then said, I would have hoped you asked. That did absolutely nothing useful to my pulse. A car passed behind us. Somewhere down the street, a group of people left a bar laughing too loudly. The normal world continued, completely unaware that a first date had quietly become something neither of us wanted to end. I stepped a little closer. Not too close, just enough for the space to change. Claire noticed. Of course she did. I should probably let you go, she said. You should probably drive straight home before that hose remembers it's temporary. Very romantic. I'm trying to keep you alive long enough for a second date. That stopped her. Then she smiled. Slowly. A second date? If the mechanic passes inspection. I'm still evaluating. Fair. She looked down once, then back up. Saturday? That soon? Unless you need more time to prepare additional roadside material. I have a whole set on tire pressure. Tempting. We exchanged a look that said more than the conversation did. Then Claire stepped closer too. And for a moment, I thought she might kiss me. I wanted her to. That surprised me. Not because she wasn't beautiful or interesting or easy to like, because wanting something new had felt dangerous for so long that I almost didn't recognize it when it showed up without warning lights. But then her car made a small clicking sound. We both looked at it. Claire closed her eyes. Absolutely not. I laughed. She opened one eye. Do not laugh at my suffering. I'm laughing at timing. Your date is very unreliable. Your car is. Same team tonight. I crouched by the front tire and listened for a second. Nothing serious. Just cooling metal. When I stood, Claire was watching me. Not the car. Me. What? I asked. She shook her head. Nothing. That was not nothing. It's just. She smiled faintly. I think I forgot what it felt like for someone to make a problem smaller instead of making me feel silly for having one. That one got me. Hard. I didn't have a clever answer, so I gave her the simplest one. Then I'm glad I pulled over. She held my gaze. So am I, she whispered. And suddenly Saturday felt very far away. I did follow her home. Not in a dramatic way. In a, your car is being held together by a temporary roadside fix and sheer optimism way. Claire insisted she could make the 10-minute drive alone. I insisted that if her temperature gauge moved even half an inch, I wanted to be close enough to do something about it besides feel stupid later. She narrowed her eyes at me across the parking lot. Do you always turn concern into a policy? Yes. That sounds exhausting. It has saved lives. Whose? Mostly engines. She smiled, got into her car, and drove carefully through downtown with me behind her in my truck, both of us moving through the quiet streets like the least efficient parade in North Carolina. Her car made it. Barely. When we pulled up outside her small brick duplex, she got out and pointed at the sedan with theatrical pride. Look at her. Strong, elegant, basically healed. The engine gave a sad little sputter. Claire stared at the hood. I looked at her. She lifted one finger. Do not say anything. I wasn't going to. You were absolutely going to. I was going to say she has a fighting spirit. That's better. She also needs a tow tomorrow. Claire groaned and leaned against the door. Of course she does. I stepped closer to the car, listened for a second, then nodded. I can have my shop pick it up in the morning. Ryan, you don't have to. I know. She stopped. That had become a strange pattern between us already. Her saying I didn't have to. Me knowing. Neither of us quite acting like that changed anything. She looked up at me under the porch light, softer now, the humor still there but no longer covering everything. Thank you. You're welcome. A pause. The kind that asks if either person is brave enough to make it mean more. Claire's fingers rested on the strap of her purse. So Saturday? Saturday? No cars? I can't promise that. I mean for the date. For the date, no cars. Unless you consider me driving to pick you up a breach of theme. I'll allow transportation. Generous. She smiled. Then she reached out and touched the cuff of my shirt, right where the grease stain had survived dinner and soap and every attempt I'd made to look civilized. You know, she said, I think this was my favorite part of tonight. The stain? The fact that you came in exactly as you were. Her eyes lifted to mine. No performance. That was the line that stayed with me after I drove home. Not because it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said. Because it was the thing I had not realized I wanted someone to value. Saturday came too slowly. Her car came to my shop first. Claire arrived behind the tow truck in Vanessa's car, wearing jeans, a white t-shirt, and a light denim jacket. No cream blouse. No blind date polish. Just Claire, with coffee in one hand and the expression of a woman prepared to negotiate with machinery and possibly lose. My brother Luke leaned against the office door and whispered, "Is that the blind date? Don't be weird. I'm being observant. You're being unemployed for the afternoon if you keep talking." Claire walked in and looked around the shop with open curiosity. 2 bays, tool chests, an old Mustang under a cover, the wall of keys, the crooked sign Luke had made, and the coffee machine making its usual wounded noise in the office. "This is very you," she said. "You've known me for 1 date and 1 roadside emergency." "Still," Luke stepped forward, grinning. "I'm Luke, brother, employee, emotional support witness." I closed my eyes. Ignore him. Claire shook his hand. Claire. Blind date, client, and apparently owner of a sedan with a dramatic nervous system. Luke looked at me. "I like her. Go order parts." He went, but not before giving me a look that said I was going to hear about this for weeks. The car needed the hose replaced, a belt adjustment, and 1 small mercy from God. Nothing catastrophic. I told Claire as much while she stood beside the open bay door, watching me work. She didn't hover. She asked questions. Good ones. Not because she cared about engines, exactly. Because she liked knowing how things worked. I liked that. More than I should have. When I finished the estimate, she looked relieved and embarrassed at the same time. "I can pay now. No rush." Her chin lifted slightly. "Ryan." "What?" "I don't want special treatment because we went on a date." "You're not getting special treatment. You're getting standard treatment with better conversation. That is suspiciously charming. I have moments." She studied me for a second, then nodded. "Fine, but I'm paying." "Yes, ma'am." Her eyes narrowed. "That tone is dangerous." Noted. By late afternoon, the car was fixed enough to stay at the shop overnight for a final check, and I had exactly 40 minutes to go home, shower, and become date-ready for a woman who had now seen me in my actual habitat and still seemed interested. Our second date was supposed to be simple. Seafood place by the water. No road shoulders. No engines. No family conspirators. And for most of the evening, it was perfect. Claire told me about her father's health scare, the job she left, the weird relief and guilt of starting over in a place where people still remembered who she used to be. I told her about my engagement ending, about the shop nearly failing the first year, about how easy it was to make work sound noble when sometimes it was just hiding. The more we talked, the less it felt like a second date. It felt like we were catching up to something that had started before we knew each other's names. After dinner, we walked along the Riverwalk with ice cream because Claire claimed serious emotional conversations required sugar afterward. The air smelled like salt and fried food. Boats rocked softly in the marina. The sky had gone purple over the water. She stopped near the railing and looked out at the boats. "What?" I asked. She smiled without turning. "I was just thinking. That sounds dangerous." "It is." She looked at me then. "I'm trying to decide if this feels easy because it's real or because we're both relieved the first date wasn't awful. Could be both." "That's a diplomatic answer. I run a business. You fix cars. Same thing, more yelling." She laughed, then went quiet again. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "I don't want to make something bigger than it is just because the story is cute." I nodded. That was fair. The way we met was cute. Ridiculous, even. The kind of thing people would tell at dinners if it worked out, and quietly edit out if it didn't. But she was right. A good story was not the same thing as a good foundation. So I said, "Then, don't." She turned toward me fully. I stepped closer, but not enough to crowd her. "Let the story be cute. We can be honest." Claire looked at me for a long second. Then she whispered, "And honestly, yeah, I really like you." That hit me clean in the chest. No games, no performance, no careful first date varnish. Just the truth, standing there with melted ice cream in one hand and Marina lights behind her. "I really like you too," I said. She smiled, but there was a little nervousness under it now. The good kind, the kind that means something might matter. I reached up slowly and brushed a strand of hair away from her cheek, giving her every chance to step back. She didn't, so I kissed her. Soft at first. Careful. Then she leaned into it, one hand resting lightly against my chest, and the whole strange chain of events, Megan, Vanessa, the dead hose, the blind reservation, the roadside shoulder, collapsed into one simple thing that made more sense than any of it should have. When we pulled apart, Claire let out a small breath and looked at me like she was trying not to smile too hard. "Well," she said, "that sounded like a review." It was. "And?" She looked toward the marina, then back at me. "5 stars, she said. "Better labor skills than Hallmark." I laughed. Then my phone buzzed. I checked it. "Megan, how's the second date going?" Claire's phone buzzed a second later. She looked down and sighed. "Vanessa." We showed each other the screens at the same time. "Vanessa, if he kisses you tonight, I want credit." Claire closed her eyes. "I am going to block her." I looked at her. "You don't have to answer." "Oh, I'm answering." She typed fast, smiled to herself, and showed me before sending. "He did. You get no credit." I laughed so hard, a couple walking past glanced over. Claire sent it. Then she looked up at me, still smiling, and said, "So now what?" And for the first time in years, the answer didn't scare me. Not because I knew exactly where this was going. Because I wanted to find out. Claire's question stayed with me the whole drive home. So now what? Not because I didn't know what I wanted. Because wanting something after a long season of being careful feels strange at first. Like walking on a road you used to avoid and realizing it was never blocked. You had just gotten used to turning away. The next morning, her sedan was ready. I texted her a picture of the finished repair, mostly because that felt professional. She answered, "Is it emotionally stable now?" I wrote back, "More than either of us." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then that feels accurate. Also, I miss it. I stared at the screen for a second longer than a mechanic should stare at a text about a sedan. Then another message came in. "And maybe you too, but don't get weird." I laughed in the office so loudly Luke leaned around the doorframe. "Good news from the dramatic nervous system? Go rotate something." "I'm sensing romance." "I'm sensing unemployment." He left grinning. Claire came by after lunch to pick up the car. She walked into the shop wearing sunglasses, a soft green dress, and the kind of smile that made my brother suddenly become very interested in inventory in the back room. I handed her the keys. All fixed. She took them, but didn't leave. Instead, she looked around the shop, then at me. "So this is where the magic happens." The phrase magic is doing a lot of work. No, I mean it. She glanced at the bay, the tools, the old Mustang, the crooked sign. "You make broken things safe again." That hit me harder than it should have. Because she wasn't only talking about cars. Not entirely. Over the next few weeks, we kept seeing each other. Not every night. Not too fast. But intentionally. Dinner on Thursdays. Coffee when her car was definitely not broken. A Saturday morning at the farmer's market where she bought peaches and accused me of choosing tomatoes with mechanical suspicion. A movie night where she fell asleep halfway through and woke up offended that I hadn't paused it for her. I liked the pace. More than that, I trusted it. We weren't rushing just because our first meeting sounded like something out of a ridiculous romantic comedy. We were building something in ordinary time. That mattered. A month later, Claire came with me to a small cookout at Megan's house. Megan opened the door, saw Claire, and immediately said, "I'd like everyone to remember I caused this." Claire smiled sweetly. You introduced us to the idea. My coolant hose did the real work. Megan looked at me. I love her. Control yourself. No. By the end of the night, Claire was sitting on the back porch with my sister, laughing like they had known each other for years. I watched from the kitchen doorway with a plate in my hand, and felt something settle in me that I hadn't felt in a long time. Not excitement. Something better. Peace with a pulse. 2 months later, I met her parents. Her father looked at me across the dinner table and asked, "So you're the man who fixed the car?" "Yes, sir," he nodded seriously. "Good. That thing has been testing our family for years." Claire groaned. "Dad." Her mother smiled at me. "We're glad you pulled over." I looked at Claire. She was already looking at me. "Me too," I said. That became the quiet truth of us. We were both glad I pulled over. 6 months later, Claire had a bad week at work. Nothing dramatic. Just the kind of slow pressure that makes a person go silent before they realize they're doing it. She came to the shop after closing, sat on the office couch and said, "I don't need you to fix anything." I put down the invoice I was holding. "Okay. I just need to sit somewhere that doesn't expect me to be impressive." So I sat beside her. No advice. No solution. No heroic speech. Just my shoulder against hers, the smell of oil and coffee in the office, and the sound of the shop settling around us. After a while, she reached for my hand and whispered, "This is why it scared me." "What?" "You." She looked at me then. "You make things feel possible without making me feel pressured to become someone else." I didn't know what to say to that. So I kissed her forehead and said, "Stay as difficult as you are." She laughed into my shoulder. A year later, she moved in. Not because of a grand crisis. Because one Sunday she opened the cabinet in my kitchen, saw her favorite tea next to my coffee, and said, "You know I basically live here already, right?" I looked around at her books, her sweater on my chair, her shoes by the door, and the grocery list on my fridge written in her handwriting. I had suspicions. She moved in the next month. Her sedan stayed, somehow. I offered to help her buy something newer. She said, "Absolutely not. That car is part of our origin story." I said, "That car tried to sabotage your origin story." She said, "And failed. That's character." 2 years after the roadside repair, I proposed at the shop after closing, not because it was glamorous, because that was where our life had started becoming real. I had cleaned the place more than any man has ever cleaned a repair shop. Luke helped hang little string lights over the office window, and then claimed he was too emotionally expensive to stay and watch. Claire came in, thinking we were going to dinner. Instead, she found me standing beside her silver sedan, freshly detailed, with a tiny ribbon tied around the same hood I'd opened on Route 17. She stared at it, then at me. "Ryan, I know it's not fancy." Her eyes were already wet. "Don't you dare apologize for this." So I didn't. I told her the truth. That I had spent years thinking starting over meant risking another ending. That she had changed that, not because she needed rescuing, but because she met me exactly where I was. Grease, caution, bad jokes and all, and somehow made the future feel less like a threat. Then I asked her to marry me. She said yes before I finished. Then made me finish because, according to her, I deserved the full speech and you clearly practiced. She was right. I had. At our wedding, Megan and Vanessa both tried to claim credit. Claire held up one finger and said, "The car gets first mention." So in my vows I said, "I'm grateful for bad timing, bad hoses, and the woman who made me glad I was late." She cried. I almost did. Luke definitely did, and denied it for 6 months. Years later, Claire still tells people I fixed her car before I knew she was my date. I always correct her. "No," I say. "I met you before I knew you were my date." Because that was the difference. I didn't choose her because a setup told me to. I chose her because on the side of a road, in the middle of a ruined plan, she laughed like life was still allowed to surprise her. And it did. It surprised both of us. What would you have done if you stopped to fix a stranded woman's car on the way to a blind date? and then realized she was the woman you were supposed to meet? And have you ever had one ruined plan turn into something better than anything you could have arranged yourself? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.